Hey, hello once again, and welcome to Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent Playlist. I'm Matt,
I'm Sheryl.
and we continue our tour through the musical year 1980. We are almost to the end of the road. This is our penultimate 1980s show. There's a sportscaster word for you.
I
We are
have
going
never
to
heard
take a
that
look at
word
a.
before.
You've never heard that word before.
No.
Well, the ultimate would be the last show. The penultimate is the second to last of something.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay. That
yeah.
works.
If I do nothing else, I'm educating my partner here,
Just
and we're educating
constantly
ourselves.
learning. Yes.
But that again. If no more than a handful of people ever listen to this or watch this or whatever, we're getting off on it every week because we're music mad. We're crazy about music. We're always looking for new stuff to get into, and this is just another gateway of discovering new music. And I know in our when we wrap up years, we look at our runners up, the songs that didn't quite make the playlist, but we love from that particular year. We'll bring Cheryl's husband, Mike. They, of course, co-own the Silver Platters record store chain up there in Puget Sound area. Mike will give us his favorite song and album from the year as well. And we'll look at those also rans, those runners up, the songs. But and another thing, particularly with 1980, I'm going to run down some things that just that I'd never listened to that now I'm maybe not obsessed with, but very into. And there's a few of them from several of the years we've gone through already.
Me too, actually. There's quite a few that I just had either never gotten around to listening to. Some of them are big albums, like, bands that are popular bands I just never really listened to before. And other ones are just kind of obscure things that I didn't even necessarily know came out in 1980. But when I start researching and looking at what's from that year, I'm like, oh, okay, this looks interesting. And then I just kind of started exploring and finding all kinds of gems.
And again, this has been kind of a tricky year for me. There's a lot of cool songs from 1980, but just not a ton of them that just leapt up from the pack and said, pick me, pick me. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we've picked a few, but we've done a lot of genre exercises. And actually, what we're going to do on this show is combine what initially we were planning on having individual shows dedicated to these subgenres. We're going to split this one in half. We're going to talk about the crossover country phenomenon and the movie that came out in 1980 that kind of instigated a lot of that, Urban Cowboy. And then we're also going to talk about the first ska revival, which a lot of these songs and bands had big hits in the UK. None of them really got past the underground cult college level here in the United States, but all of this music has had staying power. And of course, there would be another ska revival down the line with bands, US based bands that had hits with music based in that style. But why don't we start with the ska revival? So it really began in '79. I think is when
Yeah.
Jerry Dammers starts the Two Tone record label, and then the name of the record label would come kind of to define the whole musical movement, which was based in ska. And for those who don't know, it's a Caribbean style of music, kind of a progenitor of reggae music.
Yeah. It was popular initially in the 60s. Two Tone Records was formed during this movement. And like you said, Jerry Dammers, who was the keyboard and main songwriter for the Specials. So they're from an area in the UK called Coventry, which is just out kind of outside Birmingham in that area.
Industrial Northern England.
Very much an industrial area,
Yeah.
which is really important in this story, actually, because, a lot of working class people there. And it was also very much a mixed racial area because you got a lot of people coming in there. There was a lot of jobs there in the industry and like automotive industry. And so you had people coming in after World War II from Jamaica, which was a British colony at that time. So you had a lot of people coming in to work there. And with that, they brought their music. And at the time, too, in 1979, I mean, this was like a very difficult time in England where you had a lot of unemployment starting to ramp up to the Thatcher era. And
a wave of conservatism sweeping the globe, or at least the Western countries.
yeah, in England, there was a lot of, anti-immigration ideals that were kind of seeping up with the National Front, which are basically like what we would call neo-Nazis now, skinheads, that whole movement. So one of the things about two-tone, and where the name comes from too, and the whole imagery behind it, is that most of the bands were a mix of black and white and multiracial members. And that was very intentional. People like Jerry Dammers from the Specials, he saw music as an opportunity to be able to unite people and to also show that, when they're up on stage together, that there's a unity there. And this is definitely a movement that was very specific to Great Britain. And it really didn't come across into the United States. You had kind of a handful of bands that were recording on two-tone, but you had the Specials, the Beat, which we called the English Beat because there's a band in America called the Beat that really didn't seem like anyone knows or cares about them anymore.
Power pop band, new wave band, LA based.
Mm-hmm. The Selector and Madness, they were the main bands that were recording on two-tone. The Specials are probably the band that really has the most impact here in this movement because, Jerry Dammer started two-tone, but also they and maybe the Selector were the most political.
Yeah, they kind of set the political tone.
Yeah. And which that came from reggae. And, they were big fans of reggae. And with reggae, you've got the sound, but you also have the lyrics are very politically motivated. So for the Specials, in fact, their first single, Gangsters, was actually a rework of Prince Buster, who was a ska artist from the 60s and a Jamaican artist. They did a rework of his record, Al Capone. They actually couldn't scrape up enough money to have a B-side. So the B-side was a song called The Selector by the band The Selector, which was actually just a friend of Jerry Dammers who had a demo that they said, want to put this up together with us and, we'll put it out as the B-side. And that's how The Selector actually was born from that. So they put out this single and it charted. At the same time that this is happening, you've got punk going on. You've got what's starting kind of like the new wave and the new romantics and the post-punk stuff, because we're starting in about 79 is when two-tone was created. And then you've got ska coming into this, and you have all these bands that are sort of doing very different styles of music, but they're all popular at the same time. And actually the Specials toured with the Clash, and they kind of came up, and I mean, which makes sense, but because the Clash was very much reggae oriented too. They had a reggae and a dub sound to them. And really, when they were touring with the Clash, like in 78, they were still kind of doing more reggae, the Specials were, but they started seeing punk bands coming in and like speeding up, everything was like a lot faster, and it's just and it had so much more energy to it. So they started bringing in more of that ska beat, which is faster, and it still has like that chick on the downbeat like reggae does.
Right.
But it's just
up tempo dance music. Yeah.
But it's just so much more energized, and it just has such a different vibe to it. And it also became one of those movements like punk where you really had the audience just fully integrating with the bands. So Jerry Dammers, they started shopping around the single, and Chrysalis Records wanted to sign them, and they actually gave them the financial backing to start Two-Tone Records. Jerry Dammers ran the label. He and Horace Panter, who's the bassist in the Specials, they had a friend who was a graphic designer too, and they created the graphics for Two-Tone, which is now iconic. And it's actually based on a photo of Peter Tosh, who back in the 60s when he was in the Wailers.
The Wailers were a trio, Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and Bunny Livingston, who later went by Bunny Wailer.
Yes, yeah. So they took an image of him with his skinny suit and little pork pie hat, and they took that, and that's where they created the two-tone image. The guy who, oh God, what's his name? He has a name.
Oh, the designer?
No, the two-tone guy.
Walt Jabsco.
Yes.
Walt Jabsco.
Walt Jabsco is the name of this character. He represents, very similar to what was happening in the mid-60s with the mods, which is also a very British thing that never made its way over to America, and bands like The Who and, the Small Faces, but the Who is definitely like at the forefront of the mod movement, and they would go to the tailors and have suits made. The ska guys were using sort of the same fashion in that way. And they loved The Who. In fact, the Specials' first album, the cover is actually based on the photo of The Who Sings My Generation, where they're looking down on them. And, the photographer is looking down. It's kind of like a very similar scene. So anyway, just like that mod movement, they also were very integrated with their audience in that way too, where the audience was dressing just like the bands and they all kind of had this style. The audience would come up on stage with them on their encores and just be with the band. They broke the stages many times because they had so many people up there that they couldn't hold the weight of all the people. And it was just like a huge party. But they were also saying something in the lyrics. Let's see. The Specials' first album came out in 1979. Elvis Costello produced it. And, a lot of this music actually does have that keyboard sound that is very similar to Elvis Costello and the Attractions. It's
Steve Naive keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were definitely influenced by that.
And you can hear the influence of Caribbean music throughout all kinds of bands at this. I mean, Police is an obvious one, starting with their first album in 78, but all kinds of bands by 79 are starting to show this influence. I mean, XTCs. I mean, a lot of the new wave.
A lot of bands incorporate that sound.
Yeah.
So, we start with the Specials, and then the Selector kind of piggyback on that with the B-side. They become a band. Pauline Black, who is one of the few women in this movement, she was the lead singer of the Selector. They end up recording an album. And then you got Madness, who are actually probably the most well-known in America because they had a big hit in 1982, I think it was, with Our House.
Really the only band from that scene to have a hit in the United States, although General Public, which was a offshoot band, a band that we're going to focus on and the track you're going to choose, would have a hit years later.
Yeah, in like 83, I think.
Yeah.
So Madness, and then the English Beat, who were just known as the Beat in the UK. So they record their album in 1980, and they're actually kind of a little bit... They're from Birmingham. Yeah. Of those four bands, I mean, I would definitely say the Specials were the most like political and really like stayed true more to the ska sound. The Selector too were much more in that vein.
Specials probably had the most hardcore fan following too, and I would take that word in multiple meanings. Their gigs could be pretty rough.
Yeah,
they drew a lot of hooligan types to their shows. It wasn't their intent, certainly, but.
And I think kind of maybe Madness too, because Madness had more of that skinhead following. Of all of those bands, I would say that the English Beat were the most pop. They definitely had the ska sound. Ranking Roger, who was Jamaican doing toasting, he really brought in that sound, the Jamaican sound to the band, and also the horns.
Toasting, if you don't know, is, I mean, it's a form of, really before
it's
rap.
A precursor to rap. Yeah.
It is a precursor to rap. I just watched I don't know how I missed this, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, which I'm usually super into.
Oh, yeah.
I missed it. It was last month. I missed the first airing of it. I watched it a couple of nights ago, and they inducted Kool Herc, who is considered to be the first hip-hop DJ in the United States in 1973, and he had Caribbean background.
Yeah.
So I mean, the whole concept of rapping, speaking over the music, really is drawn from Jamaican music.
Yeah, they were incorporating this too into ska. The main guys in the English Beat, Dave Wakeling, Ranking Roger, they are the two that actually broke off and started General Public as well, who, like you said earlier, had a hit with Tenderness in the US. Their first singles actually, I think, was Tears of a Clown, which hit the UK number 6, and a remake of Smokey Robinson, Tears
of a Clone.
So the song I'm actually choosing, the album is I Just Can't Stop It. The song I'm choosing is Mirror in the Bathroom, which this whole album is so great. I mean, really, every song on this album is great. And it's a really good example of this movement, but it's also just, it will hold its own as just a pop album too. I was first introduced to two-tone, which probably a lot of other people were too in this way, by the compilation This Our Two-Tone. I had it on cassette, And it had examples from those 4 bands, plus maybe a couple others, Body Snatchers, and there might have been another band on there, but it was mainly those 4 bands.
There was another band that was popular in England called Bad Manners,
Bad
and I've never
Manners.
really listened to their stuff.
They're kind
Yeah,
of more like Madness, I think. I've
yeah.
only seen them. The other thing, that there was a tour that they did in 1981, I think, or maybe it was 82. It was Madness, The Selector, The Specials, English Beat, Bad Manners, and the Body Snatchers. And it came out as an album and a video called Dance Craze.
Yep, I've got the CD of both of those.
And that's been re-released over the years. So I think with that and this Our Two-Tone compilation, that's kind of what that introduced people to that label. And then I went on and I started reading about when we were going back and reading the Rolling Stone record guide and reading about these 5-star albums, and I just can't stop. It was one of those albums that was like, I was looking for it for years and years, and then finally came across it probably like in the early 90s, and
lives up to the rating. It's a great record.
It's a great record. And they actually went on. That was really the only album that was like truly ska for them. From there, they actually had a couple albums. That their third album had a song,
But
Save
even
It for Later, that was a pretty popular MTV song and kind of became like a college radio hit for them. They never abandoned that sound, but they weren't as traditional in that sense, I would say. A lot of these bands really didn't last very long. I mean, the Specials, they recorded 2 albums, and then Terry Hall, the lead singer, and the 2 Jamaican-born members, Neville Staple and Linbo Golding, they went off and formed Fun Boy 3, which also features Bananarama on their first album. That's how they launched Bananarama's career.
And they cut the original version of a song that will, I can assure you, show up on my list for 1981.
That is true. Terry Hall wrote Our Lips Are Sealed, which later became a big hit for the Go-Go's. And Jerry Dammers, he actually went back to the name The Special AKA, and he put out a single, Free Nelson Mandela, and put on like Artists Against Apartheid, and which was huge in 1985, and featured, like Peter Gabriel and Sting and all kinds of big artists. I mean, a lot of people credit him, and that Free Nelson Mandela charted. It was like a top 10 hit in the UK for bringing awareness to apartheid. And so that actually became something that he, was really known for and still is.
I would say that the Specials had one of the most electrifying, all-time great live music performances on Saturday Night Live. When they first came to the United States, they went on SNL and they did Gangsters. And they tore it. I mean, it was, it's surprising they didn't have more success here. I mean, they're clearly a fantastic live act.
It's amazing too, in that performance, Neville comes out with a gun. I mean, it's a fake gun, but he's
a fake
just
machine gun. Yeah,
a big machine gun. He's just toting
and
it
they
around.
all look,
they're dancing
and they look
around
like
with it.
Total badasses in their suits and their shades.
Yes,
and he's,
yes.
And Terry Hall's this kind of intimidating big guy up front with this psychotic glare on his face.
And Jerry Dammers has no front teeth and still doesn't. He's never had them fixed. Yeah, it's pretty intimidating.
They're super energetic on stage, which fits their music. It's just a mesmerizing performance.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, a lot of that SNL stuff is hard to find online, but you can actually dig that up pretty easily. It is definitely worth checking out. I would put that right up there with some of the great, memorable live performances on there.
If
like
not
Neil
just
Young
for the fact that he's like wielding a machine gun, on live TV, and nobody seems to bat an eye.
But I think all these bands were great live. It's incredibly infectious, energetic music, and musically you got to be able to deliver the goods. Obviously, you got to have a great rhythm section. One is critical. Bass and drums are really where the accent is. But the Specials could also play pretty heavy rock. I mean, Roddy Radiation, the guitar player, could wail. And then that English beat I just can't stop it. There's just so many different types of music that they're bringing into the mix there.
They do the
really
Smokey Robinson cover. They do an Andy Williams cover.
Can't get used to losing you.
Yeah. And then they also do like 2 they do a Prince Buster cover, and they do, some like actual traditional ska songs. And then, some of it definitely has like a pop bent to it.
Had we made this a full show, I would have picked an English beat song as well. And that's Best Friend, which is the second to last track on the album. And that's more of a pop number.
Yeah.
But it's just got that really catchy riff. But no, that's a great album from start to finish. Really, really good. The English beat would have been the first of those two-tone bands that I really recall listening to. I mean, it was the first one I was aware of because I remember a girl in high school I was kind of into had the tape. I was like, oh, English beat. But I don't think I ever listened. I don't actually listen to them until I got to college. And then probably starting with their last album, which is a little more smooth. I mean, there's some classic tracks on Special Beat Service.
Yeah. Save It for Later, I Confess. Yeah.
Really, I mean, and when that album comes out, they're on the verge of making it in the United States, and then they splintered, and then General Public has a pretty sizable hit later on with, you already mentioned Tenderness.
Yeah, and actually the Andy Cox and Toady Steele broke off, and they actually started the Fine Young Cannibals with Rolling
And they had big hits.
And they had
number one hits.
Number ones.
So,
two number ones in the U.S.
English Beat was on the verge of really hitting it big, which is sad. They broke up, and they really never patched it up ever again. I mean, they had different, kind of touring versions of the group at different times. I know, Sheryl, you and I saw one of those versions out of the Gorge opening for Sting.
Oh, yeah.
It was actually a combination of the Special Beat.
Yeah, it was called Special Beat. That's right. Yeah.
It was Special Beat, Vinx, and then Sting.
Yeah.
Out of the Gorge. Yeah.
The English Beat is basically Dave Wakeling now. And he does tour as the English Beat. And actually, I have a funny story about that.
Finally, the story! You were teasing me about this story for weeks.
They played a show in Seattle. A friend of mine's band was opening up for them. This was in 2019, and it was a benefit show at Meridian Park in Seattle. Another friend and I were selling T-shirts for my friend's band. So we had a table set up and sold shirts during their set. And then when they were done, a guy from the English Beat walks by, and he's holding boxes of T-shirts and asks if he can use our table. And I was like, sure. Do you have any, is there going to be somebody here selling the shirts for you? And they seemed pretty unorganized. And I said, because, if you want, we could sell them for you. And he was like, yeah, that would be great. So we set up the table with, folded the shirts nicely and put them on the table. And then we put up signs. We couldn't only take cash because we didn't have any way to take credit cards. And we had a tent. So we hung up the shirts around the tent and we put them on so we could model them. And more people start coming up. And pretty soon we have a huge line. They're just throwing money at us. And we're taking the money and selling shirts all throughout the whole show. And so the English Beat and afterward, I go down and I'm like, I was just like throwing the cash into this box down under the table because I was like, I didn't, I wasn't prepared for this. I pull out the cash and I'm like getting it all together and counting it. And so I go over to Dave Wakeling and I said, hey, that was great. You guys were great. I'm a really big fan. And he was like, oh, aren't you the one that we're selling our shirts? And I said, yeah. He goes, I kept seeing people come back into the audience with our shirts on. And I was trying to figure out where they were coming from. And I was like, yeah, well, we had a table over there. And he's like, oh, how'd you do? And I said, oh, we sold $2,000. And he was like, what? And I said, we sold $2,000. And here it is. And I like hand him this wad of cash. And he was like, you're kidding. And I'm thinking, they're so lucky that we are such honest people because we could have so easily just walked away with all of this cash. They had no idea how many shirts they gave us. They were paying attention to how many left, and I was like, yeah, well, here's your cash. And he was just like, wow, thank you. I'm like, well, if you want, you could bring us on tour with you. We could sell your shirts for you. So anyway, that's my Dave Wakeling story.
So you choose Mirror in the Bathroom. What makes that song stand out for you as opposed to others on this great album, start to finish? It's a clever lyric.
On the album. It is. It's a clever lyric. It's so catchy. It's just like, It's so, it's got the horns. It's got, the cool saxophone. And I love his vocals on that song.
I guess I always assumed the song was about cocaine. because of the era when it came out. But it's really, I mean, I think that's a clever thing you can read into it, but it's really about narcissism more than anything else, isn't it?
I don't know. I guess maybe. I mean, I
You're just
actually
more into
was
the music,
asking.
right?
I'm more into the music. I asked Dave Wakeling about this. I not that song, but I was asking about "Save It for Later" because Pete Townsend does a cover of "Save It for Later" on his solo tours and on his Deep End Live album. It's on that album, and he was like, "Yeah, I think Pete had some ideas about what it's about, but it's not really." Mostly, I was just pretty much just writing about women and and or we'd always be trying to kind of get away with something. Like there's a line in in Tenderness where it says, like a buck you can't stop pushing it, and it kind of sounds like another word, and he's like, yeah, we were always trying to
Yeah.
get away with things like that. And so who knows, maybe they were trying to get away with maybe people thinking it was about cocaine, or he liked it when people put their own interpretation on the songs. And that's where I think the English Beat of all of these bands, they did have some political bent to their songs, like Stand Down Margaret. And, they weren't like totally apolitical, but
Right.
I think less so, definitely less so than the Specials, which like Ghost Town, which was their last single, was very dark and really painted a picture
Right.
of what England was like at that time, and probably their most important album.
My good friend from London, who is mixed race, mother's from Cayman Islands, he's our age, and that was a huge song for him and his peers when that came out, because it encapsulated the mood of that time perfectly. And it was
Yes,
bleak, very bleak time in London.
it
Yeah.
was. And that song really does set the scene. And that was their last single. So I think as far as the English Beat goes, I could have picked most of that album. I
Right.
could have
Twist and Crawl,
chose
another great
Twist and
track.
Crawl. Yes,
Yeah.
love that song. There's just so many good songs
Two
on that
Swords
album.
is really cool. I know,
Mhm.
I only listened to this album for the first time while we were touring 1980, and it is really good from start to
Oh, you
finish. No
hadn't listened
question
to it
about it.
before?
No. I'd listened to Special Beat Service plenty. I'd listened to their greatest, like one of their hits compilations. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think I've ever listened to their second album. What
It's
what
what happened.
happened?
What happened?
What happened?
Their second album, I think, is one of those that I've done this before with other bands and albums too, is that it wasn't rated very highly on the Rolling Stone Record Guide. So I was always kind of
No.
like, meh. So I've only listened to it a few times, and I just never
But
gave
if
it
we're
much attention
discovering
after that.
nothing else from doing this show, that you cannot use that as your guide, or you're just going to miss out on so much great music.
Exactly. So I should go and
Right.
really listen to that album. But I love Special Beat Service is one of my favorite albums of all time. But yeah, I would say that overall, it's just such a great album all the way through. And that song is just one that really stands out to me because I just love the beat. I love the up tempo, and I love the vocals.
Yeah, well, it's great lyrics, excellent musicianship, and really good songs. You know that have something to say and get you on the dance floor. And that's really what this whole movement was about. I mean, that Specials first album is outstanding too. I mean, it's a different vibe with them. They're not as poppy. They're a little heavier.
That's
But
an album I really hadn't listened to and hadn't really spent time listening to all the way through. But when we were in 1979, I did go and listen to that album. And
yeah, and then really again,
good.
the only hit to come out of this in the United States was Madness a few years later with Our House, which made the top 10. Then obviously the various spin-offs of English Beat had success. So one hit wonder for general public, but
yeah,
Fine Young Cannibals shifted a lot of units. With
oh yeah, they were big. She Drives Me Crazy. Yeah. That was just like everywhere. Yeah.
Yep.
And actually, the Selectors album is really good. That's one that I hadn't listened to either. Pauline Black, lead singer.
Well, that instrumental is excellent. That's on Gangsters, but then Too Much Pressure. I thought that was one of the classic tracks from that era.
Yep.
So I mean, if I were putting together a Mount Rushmore of the ska revival, I think I would put Best Friend up there from English Beat, although it's a tough call pulling one for those guys. Too Much Pressure, Too Much Too Young by the Specials, one of my favorites. And then I guess you got to put a Madness track on there. Maybe, what was their debut?
Madness.
I'm drawing a blank. No, the
One Step Beyond.
One Step Beyond. Thank you very much,
And that
Sheryl.
was actually
One
pretty
Step
big. I mean, people in the States know that
Yeah.
song, I think. That's,
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it's one of those things where, I mean, like, like another song from 1980 that didn't quite make our list, What I Like About You by the Romantics. That
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a hit. Most
Yeah.
people assume that was a big hit because you hear it we've heard it all the time for years at sporting events and stuff. That
Yeah.
wasn't a hit.
Huh.
You know,
Yeah.
and sometimes it just takes a long time for this stuff to seep through to the general public.
It's amazing how popular Madness was in the UK, though. They had 13 back-to-back top 10 singles from 79 to 83.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
huge in the UK. And it's, I mean,
Yeah,
people
and
know them
they're
here.
still
They
kicking
have, like,
around. They're
yeah.
still pretty much together as a unit too.
Mm-hmm.
Which can't say about the other groups, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, you know who else is together at the ripe old age of 90 years old? Willie Hugh Nelson, who was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame last month. I don't know. Do the inductees choose who inducts them?
I don't know.
I guess I don't really know how that works.
Usually, oftentimes there is a connection there. Like, they know them. But
unfortunately, Dave Matthews inducted Willie Nelson into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh.
And Dave Matthews seemed to have been rather refreshed when he went out on stage. And, we had to listen to him perform a Willie Nelson. And Dave Matthews seems like a decent enough guy. He's got, he seems like a really funny guy. He's got a great sense of humor. But I just don't dig his music. And I know I'm in a camp of millions. There's millions of others that can't get enough Dave Matthews. And then he's got this huge legion of haters.
Well, he's kind of like Hootie and the Blowfish or something. Like, there's certain musicians and certain bands that they're hugely popular.
Yeah,
and they have a big following,
different with him.
But
it's different with him.
There's something hateable about them,
Yes, something just really irritating about.
Yes.
Well, certainly his singing style just rubs me raw.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a Dave Matthews Band is a one-hit wonder, basically. Ants Marching. That's a good song.
Dave Matthews Band, when that first album came out, I loved it. Mike brought it home before I'd ever heard it on the radio. He brought home like a demo copy of it, and I was the
second
Under the
record,
Table Dreaming. Under the Table Dreaming.
Yeah.
That was their second, and I was like, oh my god, I love this. I listen to it all the time, and then they actually. This is an aside, I know, but I have a funny story about this too.
Go ahead.
We went and saw them at the Saint Michel Winery. And that was all I knew of them, is this album Mike had brought home. I had no idea if anybody else in the world even knew who Dave Matthews was. Like, their songs weren't even that popular on the radio yet. The front part, they have like chairs, folding chairs they put down. And then the rest of it is all general admission behind that. And we were in the first row. Like, we sat down in the first, I'm like, oh my God, we're in the first row. This is so exciting, because I loved that album so much. And the opening act came out, and she was really good. I can't remember her name, but she had a song that was popular at the time. It was really good. And so then we're waiting for Dave Matthews to come out. And as soon as he comes out, every person goes bonkers and lifts up all the chairs and throws the chairs out and rush the stage. And I'm like, where are these people coming from? Who even knows who Dave Matthews is? Like, I didn't even think anybody knew who he was, because I only knew because we had this album that Mike had brought home, and he was like massive. People were going crazy over him. I didn't know that he had that following, before that.
I was in Atlanta when they were breaking out, and they were big in the South before they spread to the rest of the country. So I just was inundated with Dave Matthews down there. But yeah, there's a lot to like about that band. They're incredible musicians.
Oh my gosh, Carter Beauford,
drummer is ridiculous. Yeah,
he's amazing.
Ridiculous. Yeah. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked here. So, Willie Nelson, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You're like, Rock and Roll Willie Nelson. Well, we put Dolly Parton in there last year. And by the way, Dolly Parton, bless her little heart, wasn't going to accept her induction, and then relented and figured, well, I'm not a rock and roll artist, but if they're going to put me in this Hall of Fame, I better make a rock and roll record. So she did, and it came out this year, and it's a fun listen. I spun it today. It's long. It goes out. I mean, I started listening to it, and then I'm in the car, and I was like, oh, I wonder what other song she's gonna. And I'm like scrolling. It's like, what is this, a triple album? Oh my God. Did she just want to get it all out now so she didn't have to do it again?
Yeah.
But cool of her to do that. I mean, but both Willie and Dolly are just totemic, icons of
They're
American
national
music.
treasures.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I'll say it again, I still love watching the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, but it gets more ridiculous every year because it's more and more music that has nothing to do with rock and roll. So just change the name of the bloody place already, okay? So just
Yeah.
all these people that bitch and complain about, Madonna being in or Donna Summer or Dolly or what, just change the name to the American Popular Music Hall of Fame. There, done, over,
Yeah.
okay? Because they
Hmm.
haven't put any jazz artists in there. If they're going to call it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and put Dolly Parton and Willie Nelson in, shouldn't Miles Davis be in there? Because, there was certainly rock influence on the stuff he was doing at the turn of the 70s, the Jack Johnson album, the Bitches Brew, and certainly influenced rock and roll music. And he was going to record with Jimi Hendrix, for Christ's sake. So why don't we put Miles Davis? Where does it end?
This is
Just
where we
change the
run
name.
into the genres and the purists as far as how the genre. I mean, we ran into that with the heavy metal show we did. Like, what is actually heavy metal? Even yacht
Right.
rock.
Yeah.
What's yacht rock? And with like the country crossover stuff that we're about to talk about, there's so many times where these genres have flowed together and it's too hard to try to be really specific about what they actually mean, the meaning of the name, what
Yeah.
is rock and roll? What is, I think that Willie Nelson is a really good example of one who has crossed over both on what you would consider. I mean, I don't know if I would say rock and roll, maybe pop. Maybe it's more
Yeah.
accurate to say pop, but
Yeah.
Willie's in there now.
Willie's in there now, and he performed. He's 90 now, and he was sitting down, and he's playing his trusty guitar Trigger with the band behind him, and it's a train wreck. I mean, it's
I haven't
it's
watched
just,
it. Okay.
oh God, it's painful. So
Oh.
I think
Does he tour still?
yeah, I think he's kind of winding her down. I think probably,
Okay.
which is, the fact that he's still alive at 90, this guy, as much pot as he has smoked. And
Oh my
even when,
God, I know.
the guy's been a pot smoker since the mid 50s, but he also had a 3-pack a day cigarette habit for decades. He drank like crazy, like all those country guys back then. So, he's obviously got some pretty damn good genes.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we were going to do a show on country crossover because 1980 was big. Urban Cowboy, the movie, comes out that year. And the soundtrack was a huge hit. The movie was a big hit. Country's cool now. It's crossing over to the mainstream. Designer jeans become a thing
Jordache.
now. Right. Gloria Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
I know in 6th grade, which is when this came out, everybody had designer jeans. I remember all the brands.
Oh yeah.
We were still wearing flared jeans in Chehalis.
We were
when
behind the
rest.
times in Auburn
Yes,
too.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
think it's I think it's a Northwest thing. We're still wearing,
Well, we're
bell
practically
bottoms.
Alaska here, so it's like.
But, Willie's part of that crossover phenomenon in 1980, but he's already crossed over by now because he had the Redheaded Stranger album in 1975, which was a massive hit. And there's a whole story behind that, too. Willie Nelson broke in as a songwriter. And once he finally made it to Nashville, he had massive hit songs recorded by other artists, songs that certainly even the most casual of music fans would recognize. Crazy by Patsy Cline. That was a Willie Nelson composition. Hello Walls is a country standard recorded by Farron Young. Nightlife was a big hit for Ray Price, one of his idols. Funny How Time Slips Away. These are all just classic country canon songs that came out in the early 60s that he wrote. But, he was a performer as well, and he'd been a performer from a very young age. He's a Texan, grew up between Waco and Dallas in a small town called Abbott, started writing poetry, was playing guitar by the age of 7, and started playing out in front of audiences, before he was a teenager. Musically gifted, musical family. His mother was he was raised by his grandparents. His parents married young and essentially abandoned he and his sister when they were quite young. His older sister, Bobby, was a talented piano player and would be a member of his band for decades. She's passed on now. So, he's steeped in music. And Texas, you got all kinds of musical influences coming in, and he just soaked it all in. And it took forever for him to break through as a performing artist. He was big in his home state because they got him there. We've talked about this before. Texas might as well be its own country. Has its
Yeah.
own culture, has its own music. You go to Texas and you listen to radio. It's almost like going to Hawaii, where you listen to Hawaii and they've got their own popular music. Same in Texas. There's a lot of stuff that you'll hear on the radio there that you won't hear anywhere else. It's Texas music is kind of its own thing. And it's a combination of many different styles of music. And a lot of that featured in his style. He's a talented guitar player, but his influence on guitar was primarily from jazz, from Django Reinhardt. So he had a jazzy guitar style and blues as well, very big influence on him. His singing style was more redolent of jazz singers. Frank Sinatra was a huge influence on his vocal style. So when he gets a recording contract and starts to cut records in Nashville, it's not an easy fit, because now you've got the Nashville sound is emerging, where they're looking to cross over to pop listeners, and they're sweetening up the music with string sections and backing choirs, female vocals. And the style that was being created in the studios just didn't really suit his style of performance, particularly his singing style. And he drove the Nashville producers nuts because they knew they had a very talented guy in their hands. And if nothing else, he was going to write hit songs for other people. But they kept cutting records with him and tried to shoehorn him into this countrypolitan, this Nashville sound that just wasn't a fit. He didn't like it either, although he put his trust, he's got these legends in Nashville backing him. He was signed to RCA Records. Chet Atkins is producing him. Cream of the crop musicians in Nashville are playing on his records. But he's just got that individual style, that jazzy vocal style where he's behind the beat.
He definitely is one of those voices of distinction, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. I mean, he is one of the great distinctive voices. You wouldn't say he's got a great voice, but he is just an absolute master of phrasing and a song stylist of the very highest order, a guy who can record any kind of vocal music and just make it his own. So he's cutting these records, and he recorded his own versions of these big hits that he'd written for others. Like his version of Crazy is gorgeous. It's so beautiful, so well sung. And I appreciate the Willie that was to come, the outlaw Willie, when he moves back to Texas and starts cutting records his own way. But I also love a lot of that Nashville sound. I mean, these are just great records. You've got some of the top musicians in the country playing on them. But you listen to some of those, and it doesn't quite work. It just doesn't work for him. Although
it's not his natural style.
Yeah. Although I got to say, his recording of Funny How Time, so it's just such an amazing song. And it's hard to hear that anybody else sing that but Willie himself, no matter what style is behind him. So he cuts a bunch of albums throughout the 60s and just never has a hit. Although when he's in Texas, he can draw huge crowds. So finally he breaks away and moves back to his home state, relocates to the Austin area, and he cuts his last RCA record in 1972, signs with Atlantic Records, the first country artist they ever signed. They created their own country division, almost for him specifically, and he cuts two really cool albums, Shotgun Willie and Phases and Stages. I got those in a box set that came out several years ago and listened to that a ton. Classic songs that Whiskey River. He opens all of his concerts and has for decades with that song. It's probably the one most identified with him, but he didn't write it. It was written by a guy named Johnny Bush. So he cuts these albums that are starting to reach a different audience. It's more of a younger audience, more of a hippie type audience than your conservative country audience. And now he's playing gigs in Texas, and he's getting more and more of a following. And this cult is developing. I mean, he's playing this club in Austin called Armadillo World Headquarters, which is kind of like the center of this progressive Texas country music movement. And they're drawing a diverse crowd. So you've got rednecks in their Western wearing their cowboy, and you got hippies, and they're enjoying the music side by side. Yeah, sometimes they're scrapping and fighting, but that's kind of what it's kind of what a lot of this
like the
scene is all about.
Movement.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, right. So he doesn't really hit with these Atlantic albums, and they fold their country division, which gives him an out. He gets signed by Columbia Records. And the first album he puts out is Redheaded Stranger in 1975. And again, it's a battle with the hierarchy. Columbia has worked with country artists before. It's not like Atlantic where it's, he's just kind of this new toy. But he turns in this record that is just very spare and Spartan, often just him and his trusty guitar, which he calls Trigger. It's actually it's a classical guitar. It's a classical gut string guitar. So again, just atypical of the genre. It's just kind of his own style. They're not really digging what he's turning in here. It sounds to them like a demo or a sub-demo tape. They've given him a $60,000 advance, of which he spent about $4,000 on the recording of this album in 1975. But, part of them signing him was they gave him complete artistic control. So against the better judgment of a lot of the execs at Capitol in Nashville when they put out this record, and it's a smash. It's a huge hit. It sells over 1 million copies, which is just unheard of for country music. Crosses over to the pop charts with Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, making a number one country and pop. And that would not be the last of his crossover hits prior to 1980. Well, he was part of the Outlaws album with Waylon Jennings and Johnny Cash, and that was a massive seller as well. Cuts a duet album with Waylon Jennings after that. That's a big hit album, goes platinum. 1978, he cuts a record of standards, Great American Songbook songs called Stardust. His producer is Booker T. Jones of Booker T. and the MGs. Again, the label's like, what is this? It's career suicide. What are you doing? Nobody's going to buy this. Massive hit album once again. So he is rolling. I mean, the guy is very well established. And now he's a stadium act. And now he's starting to get into movies. So he gets wooed to be in this movie, Electric Horseman, which starred Robert Redford and Jane Fonda, contributed a couple of songs to that soundtrack, had another hit there. Then he's the star in his next picture. It's called Honeysuckle Rose, which was the name of his tour bus. And he's essentially playing himself. And he'd be the first to tell you, he wasn't acting in either of these movies. He doesn't do any preparation. He just shows up, reads the lines. He's just being himself, and it works for him. But the producers of Honeysuckle Rose asked him to write a song for the movie. And one of the producers is Sidney Pollack, famous director. And Willie's like, well, what do you want the song to be about? I mean, so give me an idea of what you're looking for here. Well, something about being on the road. And he basically cranks out
He took that very literally.
Yeah, he writes this. It takes him about as long to write this song as it did to record it. I mean, at least the lyrics were done in about 10 minutes. He wrote them on a napkin. And then the music, he fiddled around with it for a few weeks, came up with the music. I mean, the song is as simple as it gets, but it's perfect. I mean, it's just, and On the Road Again is the song. It was featured in the movie Honeysuckle Rose. By the time Honeysuckle Rose was done in the theaters and came to be shown on television, they'd actually changed the name of the movie to On the Road Again. But, in a decades-long career, and he's cut, probably 150 albums by now. He had a couple of years, once he got that Columbia contract that gave him complete control, he was putting out like 5-6 records a year. The money's rolling in, so he's built a home studio and a golf course. He can record whenever he wants. He can record whatever he wants, with whoever he wants, whenever he wants. Basically, Willie is living his best life. Somebody asked him recently in an interview, this classic line. He's like, well, God, you're going to be 90 years old soon. Have you seriously considered retirement? And he goes, I like to play music and I like to golf. Which one of those are you asking me to give up? Which is just great. He's just the coolest.
What is
dude,
there to retire for? Right, he's
exactly.
already doing everything he would do if he was retired. Yeah.
But an incredible life. He called his band the Family Band, and it really was. His sister Bobby was his piano player forever. He kept the same people in his group for years and years and years and years. Basically lived on the tour bus, and that's the life he wanted from a young age, and it's the life he's gotten to live.
And that's the song, On the Road Again.
Made and lost fortunes. You could see what I've just started to dip into this biography. There's several books. Willie's written he's written several books of his own. This biography came out in '07, I think, written by Joe Nick Petoskey. It's a pretty good read. I've only read a little bit so far. I read, kind of the chapters around the era that we're talking about, from his signing with Columbia through to On the Road Again being a big hit. Prior to that, he'd played a White House concert for Jimmy Carter and spent the night at the White House with his wife, Connie, smoked dope on the roof of the White House with one of Jimmy's sons.
Of course.
The guy's,
yes.
He's just living an incredible life. And just a little bit I've read, you could see how he got into trouble with the IRS. The guy is basically not very organized. People who know him well said he just enjoys having chaos around him. He's just, people have ripped him off blind over the years, and he doesn't care. He
has everything he needs.
It's like, yeah. He's making millions of dollars. So what if somebody's skimming a few here? These people are. What does he say? Yeah, I could fire all these people, but I know them. What am I going to do? Bring in a bunch of people I don't know to rip me off? He just has this great wisdom about him,
which is probably why he's lived so long.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like easy come, easy go. No big deal.
Exactly. So, he got in trouble with the IRS, had to sell off a bunch of assets. He put out a record. What was it called? Who will buy these memories? Basically, all the proceeds went
just
to the
make
IRS.
Money for for the IRS. Yeah.
And it didn't take him long to make back the proceeds, because he's been a major recording act for a long time. But, On the Road Again, just picking one great country song for 1980 was tough, because it was a great year and a lot of these songs crossed over to pop. This was the year.
Surprising how many songs, actually. I mean, when you went through the list of songs, I was like, those are songs, because I am not a country fan. So the amount of songs that I know from 1980 that were crossover hits I was shocked by how many I knew.
Yeah, and there'd been country crossover hits certainly before 1980 and before Urban Cowboy. It's kind of ebbed and flowed over the years. You had Rhinestone Cowboy with Glenn Campbell, and Campbell had his '60s hits. Rose Garden, Lynn Anderson, that was a big hit in '71. I mean, you can go down the years. There's plenty of country crossovers. But 1980 especially had many of them. And, the Urban Cowboy soundtrack, Looking for Love, that could have easily been my choice. A great song. Mickey Gilley, basically the movie, which I don't think has held up particularly well over the years. I watched them. I'd never seen it. It's like a big infomercial for Gilley's.
That's the only thing I remember.
Yeah.
I saw the movie not long after it came out. I remember seeing it. And the only thing I remember is Mechanical Bulls and Gilley's. Yeah.
And the main characters, none of them are particularly likable. I mean, John Travolta's character's an asshole, and he marries Deborah Winger's character, Sissy, and then he slaps her around. And then Sissy runs off to the guy who runs the Mechanical Bull at Gilley's. He's an ex-con. He's abusive. He's controlling. Well, all the men are just jerks.
It's a very 1980s depiction of men.
And then, watching this movie, I just giggled a few times, because in my mind, I'm picturing SCTV spoofing the scenes in the movie. So they're just obsessed with this bull. I'm going to ride that thing.
I like your depiction of it was it's basically a porno, but instead of sex, they're riding mechanical bulls.
All right. Let's give props to Deborah Winger here. I'm starting to become obsessed with Deborah Winger, because this was one of her first big roles in the movies, actually. Officer and a Gentleman came later. Terms of Endearment came later. This was one of her first big roles. She did all those scenes on the bull. She's very athletic. I mean, these were very, very impressive. I mean, she's basically doing a stripper dance on the bull.
It's not easy just staying on a mechanical bull, but actually doing it while doing a strip tease. Then,
But then the whole storyline, it's like, they meet at Gilley's, they get married, they're living in a trailer, they're scraping by. She wants to ride the bull. He doesn't want her to do it because, of course, women shouldn't do that.
No.
And of course, she ignores him and thinks, well, I'm going to take lessons on the sly, and I'm going to get up there and I'm going to ride that thing real well. And then he'll come around like, what the frick are you thinking, woman? Are you just not paying attention? It's just, the whole movie is just annoying people being stupid, basically. But anyway, there's a lot of great music on the soundtrack. Looking for Love. Mickey Gilley had a big hit with the cover of Stand By Me. Eddie Rabbitt, big year 1980. He had Driving My Life Away and I Love a Rainy Night, both big pop hits. both
Yeah.
top 10. I Love a Rainy Night hit number 1 on the pop charts. Don Williams with I Believe in You, that crossed over to the pop chart. Terry Gibbs, Somebody's Knocking. Love this song. I heard that on the radio a ton at the time. Again, that crossed over in a lot of different formats. Beautiful voice. That was her first record. A huge hit with that crossed over to pop. You had Waylon Jennings doing the theme from Dukes of Hazzard. Who
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
love that song? Kenny Rogers is still having.
Coward of the County.
Well, yeah,
Wasn't
well,
that from 80?
so we've already had a couple of country crossover hits. I want country music to be represented because I want to have music that people from all genres can love on our playlist. The Gambler didn't quite make it for 1978. I strongly consider Charlie Daniels' band Devil Went Down to Georgia for 79. That was huge when I was a kid. I grew up in a small town in a conservative county in Washington, so country music very big. And then the other song that really it came down to these two would have been Dolly's 9 to 5, which is anthemic. It's a great movie.
Such
a great
movie.
Song.
Still a great movie. That movie actually holds up.
Yes. Yeah. Dolly is definitely a better actor than Willie. I think Dolly actually prepares for her roles more than
and
Willie.
She still plays somewhat herself in that movie because she's a country girl and her husband's a musician but that song was huge. I mean, that's more of a pop song to me than a country song. Yeah. Willie on the Road Again still is more of a country flavor to it. I feel that's more. Country.
We talked about this too before we started. So I've got On the Road Again on several sources, and I kept loading it onto the list. And I'm like, well, this is a live version. Where's the studio? I never noticed it's live. It's live. It was a live song.
Yeah, I actually didn't really think about it, but I've been listening to it too, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I kind of remember now that it is a live version. That's the only version. That was the version that was a hit. Was the live version.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because, he's on the road. So.
Yeah, no, it does. I don't know why I never noticed that before. I thought it was maybe a licensing thing. And it's like, oh, God, is the actual single version of that hard to find? But I guess it is just live. It's tough for me to leave Dolly out here. I'll probably put 9 to 5 on the alternate playlist. But Dolly Parton, the first record, my parents say, we've talked about several times. I had records from a very young age before I was even 3. And one of the first records they can remember me actually playing and enjoying on my record player was a Dolly Parton record. It was her first solo hit single, Mule Skinner Blues. So, Dolly is definitely close to my heart. I'm going to tell you, too, listening to the Rockstar album today, her voice, man, she is still very strong and great vocal control in the upper register. She has lost very little.
I'll have to listen to it when we do our end of the year show, which will be coming up here soon. I haven't heard it. That is really something because a lot of these artists that are getting up in their 70s and 80s, it's tough. They just can't hit those notes.
Yeah. Well, when you listen to Dolly Parton sing on her album, and she's got this laundry list of heavy hitters that she's duetting with, didn't get everybody she wanted. She really wanted to reunite Plant and Page and do Stairway to Heaven. And she does a really cool version of Stairway to Heaven. It's one of the better tracks on the record, but she couldn't get Plant and Page to come together on it. She wanted to do that because her husband, Carl, one of the great things about Dolly, she's been married to this guy, Carl, who stays completely out of the limelight. They've been married for like 100 years, and he's not into country music. He's a rock guy. So, she wanted Stairway to Heaven to be on there because that's one of his favorite songs. Oh. But she couldn't get Plant and Page. Couldn't get Mick Jagger in there. I think Mick wanted to, but had some scheduling conflict. But she had all kinds of big stars in her. But I was going to say, when you hear Dolly sing and compare it to her voice in her prime, and you hear Elton John, the way he sounds now compared to his, he's obviously, his voice has changed a lot. He's singing a much lower register.
His voice changed in the 80s. Right. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
And the range just isn't there. It's very narrow now. But when she sings softly, she sounds old. When she belts it, she still belts it very strong and clear.
And the fact that she can still belt it is amazing.
With control, she can still do all the melisma. I mean, it's impressive for her. What is she, 76? She's about my dad's age.
I love the way that she just embraced the whole rock and roll. She's wearing leather, she's just bringing on the whole image. And I just love it. I think it's so
It just,
cool.
it brings a smile to your face. She's having fun
Yeah.
with it. It's the biggest hit record she's ever had because she's crossing over to the pop audience here. Not that she hasn't before, but she's never shifted albums to a pop audience. She's had hit singles.
She's had songs, but not full
but
albums.
This specifically was a rock and roll album and released to rock and pop radio. And she's hit the top of the Billboard charts with this.
Plus,
record
I think just the way that she
76.
approached it, because of being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, just the story behind it is really cool. I don't know. She's just awesome. Mike met her once, and she was, he was, how she's like, obviously, she's built in a certain way. She's very, very thin around the waist, very large in the breasts. And he was
very few women are gifted with that combination.
Yes.
Tiny waist and massive breasts.
Breasts. So he's holding this, and it's like a little mixer. So he's getting food. He's holding a plate, and they're doing photos. And so he's trying to figure out, where do I put my hands, and where do I put? Because he's like shifting the food plate to one hand to the other, and he's trying to put his hand around her waist. But when he puts his hand around her waist, he's basically like touching her breast because there's no waist, and she's like, just lose the plate. He's like, oh, okay. She doesn't take herself seriously. She's just completely, just so genuine. And I think it just shows a lot about her as a person, just kind of how she's embraced this whole thing with her being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, to the point of even going and recording an album.
She doesn't take herself seriously, but she certainly takes her career seriously. You knew she wasn't going to just go lightly into this venture. She was going to do it right, and she was not going to make a fool of herself. And I don't know that it's an album I'm going to revisit a ton over the years, but she's
not
going
to make a fool of.
And I take her at her word. I think she felt obliged to do it, but at the same time, she is such a savvy businesswoman that I think she sat down with her people and said, okay, I think we can run with this and make some hay, hay meaning green, rectangular.
Like you said, if nobody even ever listens to this album, listens to it like on repetition, people are going to buy it just for the fact that they want to support her and they love what she's doing. There's definitely something to be said about these artists that have been around for a long, long time, like Willie. These people that have been, not only just their careers have spanned many years, but they're still making music now in their golden years and beyond, with Willie. He's probably when did his last album come out?
I don't know,
he
10
was in
minutes
his
ago.
80s. Yeah. So he's probably one of, other than jazz musicians, there's
he's actually 90. He's 90, just turned.
He's 90 now, so he's probably one of the few, if only, country and crossover artists who are still making music at that age, still putting out new material. And it just says something about the kind of person that they are, that is their life. And that's what, like you said in Honeysuckle Rose, he's playing himself. That's him. He's a performer, he's a musician, he's a writer, and that's the essence of who he is.
Yeah. Now, before we finish, a little bit of trivia. Did you know that Willie Nelson has a Northwest connection? He was actually employed as a DJ at KVAN in Vancouver. Spent time in Oregon and Vancouver, Washington.
I did not know that.
And actually, Loretta Lynn spent a fair amount of time in the state of Washington as well, when she was just getting started up in northern Washington. And Buck Owens also. So a lot of these famous country artists at the beginning of their careers were plying their trade in the Evergreen State. In fact, key part of Buck Owens' sound was his guitar player, Don Rich, who was also the harmony singer. He's from Olympia, Washington. He perished in a motorcycle accident in the 70s. So all these legendary country artists, some of the most famous country artists of all time, all have connections to Washington State.
So does Dave Matthews. He lived here for a long time.
What?
Yeah.
Dave Matthews lived in Washington?
Oh, yeah. You'd see him just like walking around in Seattle.
I had no idea.
He lived in Seattle, and he may still have a place here.
So we have one show left to tie a bow on 1980. And like our past years, we're going to bring in Sheryl's husband, Mike. He'll pick his favorite album of the year. Now, I've been laying odds that Mike is going to pick the Pretenders' first album. I'm guessing that's definitely in the running for him.
I don't know. I really hope he does, because that is one of those albums that I really hadn't listened to before we started doing 1980.
I had never listened to it. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so good. I love that album. I love it. So I hope he does choose that one. I'm going to kind of try to like veer him in that direction.
So Mike will pick his favorite album, his favorite song. Cheryl's got another song to choose as well. We'll run through our list of runners up and stuff that didn't quite make the cut for 1980, but stuff that we love as well. And then it's on to 1981.
Yeah, I guess I better start looking forward and seeing what's out there.
I've already done that, and I will tell you, I have no clue what my favorite album in 1981 is going to be. Not a clue. I knew pretty damn well what it was going to be before we started 1980. Mm-hmm. I gave many other records a chance to knock it off the perch. They did not. 1981, I haven't the faintest clue what it's going to be.
Yeah, 1980 for me was pretty much set in stone. I mean, I knew what that was going to be when we first started doing this podcast, a year ago with Pete Townsend. But I don't even know what's in 1981. It's going to be exciting to start discovering what's there.
So yeah, Sheryl's album of the year 1980 was Pete Townsend's Empty Glass. Mine was XTC's Black Sea. All the songs that we've chosen go on a playlist that Sheryl has curated on Spotify, and you can find it there. And we'll continue to add to that list next week. But until then, I'm Matt.
I'm Sheryl.
And you've been listening to Matt and Sheryl's Gen Excellent Playlist. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Take care.